Okay. So, yeah, welcome everybody to our second seminar of our spring cycle of seminars in digital and public humanities organized by the Venice Center for Digital and Public Humanities. And I'm especially pleased today to have one of the most established DH scholars in the Italian DH landscape. And I will keep things short and immediately introduce our two speakers today. Just the announcement. So as usual, we do a recording of this seminar and we will publish it then shortly on our YouTube channel. So you can get back to the materials and the discussion and be aware so that this is recorded, going to be published. So my notes are here. Okay, so Marina Buzzoni is full professor here at Venice University Ca' Foscari, Germanic Philology and Linguistics. Her main research interests include digital philology, computer-assisted systematology, historical linguistics of the Germanic languages, and the theory and practices of translation, on which she has published extensively. So she's well known as the president of the Italian Association for Humanities, Computing and Digital Culture, IUCD. She is also delegate here of the rector and president of the Ca' Foscari Library System. She participated and continues to participate in numerous national and international research projects as a PI and in other roles, currently leading also the edition project of the Leges Langobardorum, co-principal investigator of the digital Marco Polo project, and the Saba edition of the Canzoniere 1919 to 1920, now on display at the Museum of Literature in Trieste, which will also then be the content of the presentation. Roberto Rosselli del Turco, associate professor at University of Turin, where he teaches Germanic philology and digital philology. He has published widely on Old English language and literature and on digital humanities. So he's one of the early adopters and early representatives in the, so I think you were among the founding members of the digital medievalists community. So, and he is the editor of Battle of Meldon poetry and the digital Vercelli book, a very fundamental contribution to scholarship in digital scholarly editing. He is author and principal investigator for the development of edition visualization technology, EVT or EVT, a software tool known by many working in the field, created at the University of Pisa to visualize digital edition created based on XML and TI standards. So widely used here in Italy and beyond. He is also actively involved in various roles in many digital edition projects, such as the Leges Langobardorum, again, where I'm involved as well. So that's yes. Here.
We're a team. We're a team.
The Saba Project 1919. So, and the title of your presentation now is Digital Authorial Philology and Genetic Editing. So, beyond your traditional discipline, so that's very courageous, and the Saba 1919 project. So the floor is yours. I think I move here to the sofa because it's a bit crowded here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so, but I will be thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franz, for this presentation. I'm flattered, really, and well, I'm glad, really glad, and I'm also honored to be here among friends, first of all, and of course colleagues. Yes, you told that you already anticipated that our title today is Digital Authorial Philology and Genetic Editing, the Saba 1919 project. And I would like to state at the very beginning that this is a collaborative project. And so we are a team, basically. Today we are presenting, Roberto Rosselli del Turco and I are presenting, but the team include, first of all, Cristina Fenu. Cristina Fenu is a librarian at the library Attilio Hortis in Trieste, where the manuscript is housed. he's kept, and also a developer that is Davide Cucurnia, who is the developer in particular of the AVT features, the AVT themes that will be presented at the end of the presentation, that Roberto will present with some updates also, because today he told me that there are some updates on the themes that have been developed recently, lately. And also Giulia Tancredi, who contributed a lot to the definition of the TI schema. Basically, this is it. Nessuno si salva da solo. This, and you have a lot of course, logos here, because we also had the contribution of the municipality of Trieste and of the Le Fondazioni Casali, that is a foundation in Trieste as well. And to go on, it's stuck. Seems to be stuck here. Yeah. It's stuck. No. Now it's moving. Okay, the beginning. Well, the beginning is represented by a project work within a, let's say, specialization course, because it was called master in Italian, but it's not. It was not a master course. It was a specialization course in the University of Venice, and the student who produced this project work is Eleonora Morante. The main goal for the project work was to build a remote museum experience by providing a digital genetic edition of the unpublished first version of the famous collection of poems known as Canzoniere, or songbook, by the Italian 20th century poet Umberto Saga. And she worked on a prototype based on a limited set of poems. We enlarged this set of poems, and also we changed a lot, implementing and developing this initial idea. This was the very initial idea. The manuscript, as I anticipated, is currently housed in Trieste, Biblioteca Civica Attilio Hortis, and it's manuscript RP 118, and it goes back to 1919, basically. It is, we have the signature of the author, so Saba's signature. Saba self-published the first edition of the Canzoniere later on, only in 1921. So we worked instead on the very first, let's say, version. It's not a draft, it's a real version, complete version of the Canzoniere. And successive enlarged editions follows, and eventually the Canzoniere grew to contain over 400 poems spanning basically 50 years. But our manuscript is crucial, is particularly important. Why? Our manuscript is a booklet of 214 pages, containing 186 poems subdivided into sections and subsections. So we studied the manuscript thoroughly, and we also studied the corrections made by the authorial corrections made by Saba himself thoroughly. The manuscript was studied and described by Giordano Castellani to prepare an editio princeps of the Canzoniere, and more recently by Silvia Vodopivets in her PhD thesis. And we actually borrowed a lot from Vodopivets' volume and study, rather than volume. It's a volume, but Vodopivets' study. It is full of authorial interventions, and the authorial variants are either immediate or traceable to the various correction layers, amount to almost 70% of the poems. The strips of papers, we have also a strip of papers, cartiglio percette, called cartiglio percette, amount to more than 30% of the whole corpus. The corrections and the annotations were made by Saba in pens and pencils of different colors. And you have some examples here. Saba himself used, for example, a pencil to draw lines, used a red pen, and also a blue pen as well to write titles of some subsections of the Canzoniere. Trieste è una donna, with also dates, the relative dates. This is another example of some of the corrections that Saba made. It's not the worst.
No.
It's not the worst. It's quite readable, but this is an example that I usually show to my students. This under this echo, this correction made by Saba, what we probably what you can read is another word, and the word is bacio. Can you see the B, the capital B of bacio, basically underneath this echo. And then we have other corrections, and the corrections are made with the different pens, as I anticipated. Echo is written in pencil, probably. It's black pencil, while inimici is a correction made in violet, more or less. This is the prototype, actually, how the prototype, the visualization of the prototype, because the text was of course, encoded in TI, XML TI, but this is experimental, let's say, representation, the experimental visualization of the project work. And we experimented with colors at that time, but we were not completely satisfied of this fact. Why? We don't, you can see bacio here with a sort of strike, yes, strike through, and then replaced by echo, that is Saba's correction, in gray, because it was made with a gray pencil, basically black pencil, grayish pencil, and so we attributed violet to that the other correction, the other two corrections, but we're not satisfied because we wanted to focus on the process. This is too static. It was too static. The result was too static. We wanted to focus on the process, and we wanted to focus on the layers, on the different layers, on the stratigraphy, what we may call, technically speaking, the stratigraphy of Saba's corrections. That's the reason why we moved on. And we actually the relevance is that the manuscript is a repository of authorial variants, and that some of the lyrics that are transmitted in this manuscript are here in their original or their sole version. And this is particularly interesting also because our final goal, not the initial one, but the final, really the final goal, is to create to build a critical edition of Saba's Canzoniere. And the fact that some of the lyrics are transmitted here in their original, their sole version, are extremely important. And another important aspect to pay attention to in the manuscript is that some annotations and also marginal signs appear in the manuscript together with additional instructions made by Saba himself, very interesting additional instructions. And I will show you some examples of these instructions. Can you see the use of a red pen? So here in red, we have an instruction by Saba himself. Dopo la casa della mia nutrice. So this poem, which is in an additional, written down on sort of additional paper, pecetta, was to be placed, according to Saba, after another one titled La casa della mia nutrice. So this is an instruction gave by Saba himself. This is an avvertenza per lo stampatore, to the printer. So Saba addresses the printer, directly the printer. Alcune di queste poesie vanno stampate. Some of these poems have to be printed like this, for example. So this means that Saba wanted this version to be published, but he never published it because he published only a later version, 1921 version of this Canzoniere. And this is amazing. I was taken aback when I found this indication. Inviare le bozze a Umberto Saba, Trieste, via Chiozza 56. P stands for floor, probably piano secondo. So he specifies also the person or the place where to send proofs of the Canzoniere. So our main goal of the new project, the project building on the project work, but moving on, basically. Well, first of all, our goal was to, primary goal was to define a general purpose encoding schema for authorial philology, because we realized by checking the various chapters, the TI guidelines, we realized that there was no schema, proper schema. There were some indications, there some instructions, but no proper schema for authorial philology, genetic philology, focusing on the process rather than on the output, on the result of the process. To encode all texts transmitted in the manuscript and provide a diplomatic genetic edition of the manuscript, to develop a dedicated parser and also a dedicated authorial philology view in the visualization software, because AVT3 did not support, at the very beginning, did not support this genetic view. And so we had to develop a dedicated parser integrating with the existing view. But the final goal, as anticipated, was to create an innovative digital critical edition of Saba's songbook. And this final part, has not been implemented so far. So it's still under it's work in process. It's still under construction, I would say. These are the project partners, and we added also as project partners the Casali Foundations and the LETS, the Museum of Literature, where the final product is now exposed, is present, visible, and the Boston College, Massachusetts. As for the general project purpose encoding schema, we worked together with Giulia Tancredi, and then we discussed that we are, all of us, I would say, are Germanic philologists, so this is not our cup of tea, fully our cup of tea. And so we discussed the schema with Paola Italia and her team, because Paola Italia is an expert in authorial philology and genetic criticism. Then we needed some coordinators for the encoding team, and the coordinators were basically Cristina Fenu, the librarian at the Attilio Hortis Library, and Giulia Fabris. And then we had a series of encoders that are mentioned here. And as anticipated, we built on, from the semantic point of view, and to establish the text, we built a lot on our own, of course, judgment, but also on the results achieved by Silvia Vodopivets in her 2016 essay, Le penne e le matite di Saba, tracce di volontà autoriale perduta nel Canzoniere. Then we looked for models, basically, because there are some editions, genetic editions, and I think that these are familiar. You are already familiar, because you are experts in the field. You are already familiar with all these editions and genetic criticism. All of them are very good, especially the Samuel Beckett edition is a very good genetic edition. I don't think it is visible anymore, because I tried to access the website 2 days ago, and it was not visible. Hope it will be visible again, because it's a very, very good, extremely good genetic edition. But the problem is that it didn't show any layers, and it doesn't, hopefully doesn't. And for example, we don't have any apparatuses actually in this edition, at least the apparatuses as we conceive them, basically. Another very important, very interesting genetic edition is the Walt Whitman archive, is represented by the Walt Whitman archive, which is searchable and which is online. And where the images of the letters, for example, precede the transcriptions, so it's also the let's say the view is not traditional, it's an untraditional view. If we think of a critical edition, if we have in mind a critical edition, for example. And the authorial interventions are primarily put within a note element, which was not enough for us, which is good because it's an extremely good edition, of course, but was not enough for us, was not our goal, basically. Then another model we had in mind is the Johann Wolfgang Goethe's Faust. And here the critical apparatus, as you can see, is a sort of list of variant, is also can be viewed, can be visualized as a sort of list of variants. And once again, it was not enough, the list of variants. We wanted something more. We wanted, as anticipated, we wanted to have let's say, an interpretative edition of the Canzoniere, of the songbook, but we wanted to have also a critical edition of it, or to allow for a critical edition rather than to think of the TI schema in terms of a possibility of implementing a critical edition. And this is the last one, the last model we had a look to, and probably it is the closest to our idea. It is the letters of Proust letters by Elena Pierazzo. It's a prototype, only a prototype, and the prototype, well, Elena Pierazzo states that the prototype won't be implemented anymore. So this is it, basically, as we can use it online. You have the document, it is based on the document, basically. So you have the document here, and you open pop-up windows, basically. And the corrections, interventions represented on the page are not really interpreted in this kind of visualization, basically, because let's say the interventions, the edition itself is a sort of representation of the document, of the primary source, but it doesn't interpret the primary source itself. So we try to solve this problem. And we had a look at the text encoding initiative schemas, and we realized, of course, that these schemas are powerful and flexible, that there is indeed very good support for diplomatic transcriptions, transcription, especially we focused on the transcription of primary sources module, which has been enriched. That's true. There is something. This module has been enriched with the genetic criticism elements, but within the transcription of primary source. So this mainly allows for a documentary edition approach, though leaving in the background the establishing of a critical text and the process that leads to the establishing of the critical text. So it might also be insufficient, this kind of schema. It might also be insufficient in the case of multiple manuscripts witnesses to be handled by the editor. And so we tackled another problem that would defining a new encoding model. This is why we worked on combining two different modules, the transcription of primary sources with the critical apparatus, because we wanted a critical apparatus. The latter module is suitable for critical editions, which are considered to be completely different editorial endeavor by the TI editors. And so we started experimenting with combining the elements that are present in these two modules. And our conclusion is that it is indeed possible to combine the critical apparatus and the documentary elements, creating an encoding schema, an encoding, based on phases, on layers, correction layers, and different markup levels. So our first aim was to find out, to let's say spot and to find out the levels. Our final model has got 4 markup levels, basically. Taking into consideration the textual stratigraphy of our authorial manuscript, we are identified basically 4 major levels of the critical text. The textual level, which records and accommodates the readings chosen by the philologist. The genetic level, which records and accommodates the authorial corrections subsequent to the reduction of the base text in their chronological order. So we wanted also the chronological order. We wanted a typological order, as shown in this slide, but we also wanted a chronological order. So we used some TI elements that Roberto will illustrate in a few minutes, or in a few seconds, actually, in a few seconds, in order to account for the chronological order as well. Then the intratextual level, which records and accommodates the alternative variant readings, and the metatextual level, which records and accommodates the authorial notes and instructions, which are many, which are plenty, as anticipated. Then we can switch. Let's start with the very first one, textual and genetic level, and by presenting some examples as well.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you to the organizers for inviting us. Okay, so now all of this seems almost trivial to me, I must say. But
it was not at the beginning.
It was not at the beginning. I assure you that it took almost 2 years of discussion, which also was a stop and go discussion, of course, because of our time constraints. But what we did was to combine the critical apparatus module to take advantage of these basic elements of this module to handle the highest level, that of paradigmatic variants. Okay, so we are progressing at the moment from the highest level to the more detailed one. So we use the GLAM element for the lezione, for the reading which has been chosen for the critical text by the philologist, and the reading elements which record all other variants which we should discard. They are recorded, but in the final versions of the edition, they will be discarded. And the var_sec attribute is fundamental because one of the basic goals was to introduce, as Marina hinted, the chronological factor into the apparatus. So var_sec is what is allowing us to keep track of the phases of the correction layers. Within reading, then we use the mod element, which is one of the elements for transcriptions which TI offers, which is directly linked to the changes in a list change. What does this mean? It means that if you can see here the list change, we have a list, a full list of all the correction phases by Saba. All of these are described and are assigned an ID, as you can see here. So the start means layer 0, which is the initial draft of the work. And you have changes already at that phase, in fact. The layer 1, first layer of corrections, layer 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. And then, as we have seen, we also have a red pen with the indications for the publish. Okay, this is also, as you can see here, this is not ordered, but here we have a clear progression, which is a chronological progression. So, for instance, this is all at the initial layer 0 draft stage. You can see here we have a mod, just a mod, with a reference to the layer 0. In this example, we have a simple substitution. Okay, so this is something that Saba did while already working on the manuscript. Perhaps he went back to this point in the quaderno And he decided to delete by strike through, as you can see here, avendo, and to replace it with avea. Okay? Basically, you could use this approach to apply a documentary view kind of markup. This is why we said we received a comment by Lou Bernard prior to the seminar, which was something like, wait a minute, pal, because TI offers transcriptional elements, and in fact, it is very rich, but we wanted more, okay? For instance, if you have a look at Pirazzo's prototype, it is very documentary view-based. We want that, but we also want to have the possibility to add references to other variants. These variants could be in the same document, so we want to be able to reference to these variants in, how can I say, a systematic way. And also we could be interested in make references to variants which are outside the current document. For instance, if the author wrote some comments on a printed edition of his or her work. Okay, so basically this is the initial work on the document. Here you can see that we have something more elaborated. Okay, here usually in a critical edition, when you use DTI critical apparatus modules, you start with a lemma, of course, and then you have the readings for the discarded variants. We do the same here, so basically we have to start from the bottom because we add the varsec attribute, as you can see here, so that we record the whole process while we encode the text. So as you can see here, we have the initial situation, layer 0 here. Then in a subsequent correction phase, we have Saba, layer 2, that makes a deletion of this initial situation. Then in this in a follow-up, he deletes these, and again we have this final decision by Saba, add aversa pena. So we move from the initial situation, dura pena, to assidua pena, then middle ground modification, dura prima lunga pena, and then the final version, which is the one which we record in the lab. Okay, so here we have the full combination of critical apparatus elements with the transcriptional elements of the transcriptional primary sources mode. Okay, intertextual means that we have sometimes here in Saba's work, but we have seen this in other instances, the author has a short list of possible variants, possible solutions for a specific point in the text. Sometimes one of these solutions is picked up by the author by underlining with arrows other means. Sometimes they are not. So what we do is to make this explicit using this interpretation. As you know, the ANA attribute links to an interp element in an intergroup element in the ETI header. And so we know that, for instance, this is going to be linked to the alt variant case. Okay. Okay, and then what we, the only thing, again, mod, and then the only thing that we miss at this point is the add element with a place saying how and where these variants are recorded in the document. Second thinking about this, this is perhaps not the best example, because here we have exactly the same text, meaning, as you can see here, the original situation is that we have fonte in the original text, fonte comma, okay? Then Saba deletes this word and adds ioto. Then again, he adds another ioto here, which is an alt variant, possible alt variant. Again, This is only useful to show you that we can take care of these cases. And again, the final version is going to be recorded in the length, as in this case. I think there are other instances where you have 2-3 words which are written on the side of the quaderno, and there is no explicit choice. What we are going to see is a choice in the printed, as you can see here, and this is also a good example of what I was mentioning before, referencing to another witness. This is the printed version in 1921. So we can see that at least at this point, Saba thought that Fonte was going to be the final solution in this poem. Okay, metatextual means that we have, as we have seen, many notes by the author. These notes are very different in length, in meaning, purpose, and so on. So what we did, and also you can also have editorial notes, of course. So the first thing that we do is to use resp with the resp attribute with note to be sure that these are assigned to Saba, of course. And then we use the type attribute to define a topology for this kind of notes. So as you can see, you have a lot of different things. For instance, editorial indications, self-comments to the text, quotations, and so on. They really are different, and we listed the possible values for the type attributes. These are just a few examples. Okay. So here we have an editorial note, resp US, of course. This is going to link to the Umberto Saba person in the TI header. So here Saba says, it's okay, va bene. In this other case here, first Saba deletes, you can see here a del span. Okay, so it starts from this point in the text and deletes the whole stanza. Okay, so del span 2 P14.1, which is this anchor here. Then he changes his mind and notes to himself, leave this stanza. So it is a sort of restoring the initial reading in the text. Okay, this is a graphical way of depicting our encoding schema. So with the external level, you have the highest level, that of the critical apparatus elements. Then you have the mod elements, which are essential because they are linking to the different reaction phases, which are recorded in the list change. Then you have all of the transcriptional elements. Okay, here you can read del, add, subst, but of course we are going to take advantage, well, we have taken advantage of metamark, restore, undo, and so on. Okay, because it is true that TI offers a good number of useful elements. And within all these elements, the text of the Canzoniere. I will show you briefly the, or maybe not, because I see it, but it is not.
You have to share on that screen. You share.
Should I drag it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is the current prototype. And please note that this is the work by Davide Cucurnia. It is missing a few things, mainly the text image linking, making use of the TI facsimile elements, and that is my fault because I haven't yet had time to do that. But for instance, this is one of my favorite examples here. Okay. Normally, the text is quite clear, but in some cases it is a bit difficult, and I guess it would be really difficult for the general public to understand what is hidden under these deletions. It is also difficult to understand what in the transcribed text is going to be linked to what. This would be the purpose of the text image linking. For instance, here we have pensieroso. It would be good to have pensieroso linked to the deleted text. So at least you get immediately what this is corresponding to. But as you can see, pensieroso has a 0 in front of it. What does it mean? It means that it belongs to the initial version of the Canzoniere, the initial draft, already corrected by Saba, but nonetheless, this is something which he came back upon quite a few times. And we can decide dynamically to what we are interested in. Okay, so we incrementally can add, for instance, I want to see layer 1, but also layer 0, but also layer 1, okay, and all down until we get to the final correction layer, which is 5. Okay, so what we see here, and as you can see, it would be very useful. I really have to do this to go back and make the image text linking. You can see that you have the progression from the initial text to the final version. Okay, if you click on any of these highlighted items, you can see the critical box. Okay, here you have the full sequence. In the text, you can decide to make things a bit more clear, especially for the general public. Perhaps we should activate this switch by default, because here you can see that you move from il dilettoso to grazioso, and then the final version in me raccolto. Okay, so this is half of what we want to do, because this is what I call the documental view. This is the most similar interpretation of an authorial digital edition to what Elena Pirazzo has done with Proust, with the Proust prototype. But I want another view, which is more similar to the traditional critical view, with the difference that in the traditional critical view, we have the different witnesses which are published, which are recreated in the collection view. What I want to have is to be able to navigate a full, definite version of each correction layer. So to see the full text of layer 1, layer 2, and so on, in parallel among them, and in parallel with the critical text, so that I can see the critical text and see, this is what the editors have decided to publish, interpreting the work of Saba, but I can also reconstruct and compare all the different phases of correction as they happened during Saba's work. Okay. Okay, just a few screenshots. Of course, these I can keep these.
We prepared something just in case.
Just in case no live demo was possible. And this is the Let's Museum in Trieste. Very shortly after its inauguration, we visited the museum, and they have this touch panel with the current version of Saba's Canzoniere. And you can see here Cristina Feno explaining to the public how it works. This is a touch panel, so it is good that it is built on Angular, because it means that it is already touch ready for touch displays, touch things like tablets, cell phones, and so on.
And it's amazing because the manuscript is in a box, is kept
Yes,
in a glass
immediately aside, so you can
you cannot touch
browse
it.
the manuscript
You cannot
virtually, but you cannot touch it at all, of course. Okay, last part of our presentation. We are also working on accessibility and inclusivity. I know someone will hate these words on the other side of the Atlantic, but because we believe not only in having the edition published as open data, if it is open source, so open data, open source, open archives, everything is open, but we also realized that we really should work and improve the accessibility of our digital editions. By the way, this is the theme of the next IUCD conference in Verona next June. So what we did was to start studying, again, Davide did this, studying the web content, accessibility guidelines, which prescribe some general points which could be applied immediately. And we now have a development branch, which I think it has already been recently merged with one of the main branches in the EBT3 repository, which is implementing these decisions. Also, we have decided to further develop the concept of themes, because we have themes in EBT3, but till now they were used, I could say, on an aesthetic level. Okay, so for instance, you may want a traditional dark brown and black for diplomatic editions, and in EBT2 we adopted a black and blue palette of colors for critical editions. So, okay, this is not really meaningful, just something we have at an aesthetic level, but we realized we could change themes to make, how can I say, a way to meet the needs of visually impaired people. Okay, so at the moment we are experimenting with themes. These themes are going to be part of the next version of EBT. And as you can see here, they can serve several purposes. And this is where things got interesting, because when we decided, okay, we should do this by themes, but we already have a way to decide font family and font size in the normal config file in EBT. Okay, so this is being proving, how can I say, something of a challenge, because there are at least 3 different areas in configuration, let's say, where we can decide how the text is going to be showed. So we have the config files, now we have the improved themes, and we also have the editorial conventions where you can specify colors. Okay, that's a bit too much. We are discussing about how to handle all of this. On the technical ground, we are making use of the SASSI CSS, SCSS. I would read that as Sanctus, but that's my medieval background, I guess, which is a scripting language which is going to be compiled in traditional CSS. Okay, so and this is how many other things are handled in EBT. So this you can see here the scripting language, the CSS file on the right. And then our current experiments, for instance, this is a high contrast. It doesn't really show because the size of the font has been left unchanged, but we have a high contrast theme. We can improve this, of course. And for instance, we are also playing with the white text on black background theme, again, to improve legibility. And this is, you may have noticed that in in the current prototype, we use the blue to light blue palette, which
The
is
worst one.
which
The
is
worst.
yes, particularly, how can I say, malicious towards people with visual impairments. And the guidelines recommend different colors, warmer colors, which are more visible to people with these impairments. And so we are experimenting with these different palettes, as you can see here. Okay. So we still have a sort of visual cue using colors for this evolution of the text in all the different correction phases, but we are trying to make this more readable in the text for people who have problems on that side. Okay, and basically we've been very fast. These are our basic selective references, and we will be at IUCD 2025, so you can stop and talk with us about this, but we are also open to questions, like say.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. A fantastic overview. So from the philology, from the requirements as for literary scholars, to the encoding, visualization, to accessibility, and all the requirements of fair data. So fantastic. I will do this recording requirement for my students for the encoding TI class. Okay, so questions, open floor. So from home or from wherever online participants are, you can leave a note in the chat here. You just raise your hand, and I can read questions in the chat if that is useful. Okay, so please, I'm sure there are lots of questions.
Yes,
Yeah, Stefania, can you come here so that people from home can hear you? I do also the camera. No, that's fine. No, you're fine.
As
That should be
for
fine.
pecette or strips of papers, how did you manage this question, this problem?
Well, actually, we couldn't have the manuscript restored because we asked actually a center in Rome. There is a center in Rome for the restorement of ancient books. And we tried at first to restore the manuscript, but it was impossible. This is what Cristina Feno told us. So we tried basically to read the text that is underneath the pecette. If it is not readable, we just left the text as it is. We used also a blue light. So we illuminated the manuscript with blue light, but it didn't give much results, the blue light. I don't know why. I don't remember actually why we couldn't have the manuscript restored. Probably because the manuscript would be ruined.
Because
of the chemical.
They thought that it was a too invasive
Too
procedure,
invasive, yes,
and so they
probably.
were against it, basically. I can understand that.
So we did our best to.
Okay, so these are a couple of examples. The problem is that the paper is a bit thicker. So we would need more powerful means than just using the ultraviolet lamp,
yes, and the blue light
over the paper. And I think some sort of scanner could resolve this problem, but I am no graphical expert, so I may be wrong. On the other hand, we've seen very interesting things done, for instance, for the Archimedes palimpsest. So I know there are means to go beyond. The problem here is that we really have a screen be in front of what we want to read. And perhaps it would be easier to try from the other side and try to read the ink on the opposite side between the pecetta and paper. But really, we haven't investigated
much on
much
this.
about this. So.
That's a message in the chat. Who is it? My glasses. Sorry. Yeah, Marie, if I don't have my glasses, maybe you just put on your your microphone and ask the question. Yeah, we can hear you well.
I'm quite interested in this presentation because I don't know how to manage 80 witnesses, corrections that are printed corrections, and also manuscript corrections from Marie de Gournay, the editor of this edition of Montaigne. So for example, we don't use the mod, but perhaps it would be useful to use it for to improve our editions. For the moment, we use only the LAM and reading, and we have an A type to make the difference between the corrections of Marie de Gournay, a manuscript, and printed corrections. But that's all. So I try to improve and to have an engineer also to process this AVT3 because we don't use it for the moment, but we hope we can do it someday. Thank you. You know that we have worked with Elena Pirazzo because she's still in tour, and so she also tried to do the same thing with Montaigne as she did for Proust. But it's only a zoning system. It's not interpretation. It's not a critical edition, as you said. So that's why I would like to do more with a critical edition, with all these differences that could be displayed for the different kind of readings. Thank you.
The XML file is not, I just checked, is not available for download in the prototype. But if you want to know, of course, we can have an exchange via mail. But if you are interested in seeing how specific cases are encoded, we have the XML tab here. And this is an extension of the concept of the critical apparatus as a way to verify the editor's choices. Okay, we release on public, we release the XML code, so you can check it and see if it is correct. And of course, this would be useful to you to see how specific apparatus entries are encoded and learn from it. Then
yes.
we can have a chat and I can
yes.
explain more in detail how the.
Yeah, I can send a sample of what we have done for the moment. It's not online, not yet.
Okay, yes, I'd be glad to have a look at that.
Thank you.
Be useful also for us in order to have a feedback.
Yeah,
and in order
definitely.
to, of course, adjust the model on other projects, if it works, or in order to have a feedback and also improve our model if it's necessary. And mod is very useful, and EVT did not support, but
No.
so we had to improve or implement also the technical part in order to make it support that element, because it was not supported by EVT when we started the project, but mod, particularly modification for any mod. You use mod for any modifications.
Mod is the trade union, we could say, between the critical apparatus, the elements, and the transcriptional elements. And yes, and another interesting concept is that I tried, I and Giulia Tancredi, we tried to define an extensible model. But in the end, this is not our cup of tea, as Marina hinted. And so far, we only worked with Saba. So we definitely would be interested in trying the same model on other use cases.
Anyway, there is an example, for example, Wulfstan's homilies in Old English. And Wulfstan made corrections, not so that many corrections, but he made corrections, authorial corrections on the manuscripts. And so we
could have a look at that.
Yes, we can have a look at Wulfstan's homilies as well.
We have a raised hand from Pedro, if you want to raise a question.
Yes. Thank you very much for your wonderful exposition. I have a question about what about hands and inks? You know, DI allows you to show which intervention is made with what, you know, what's made it for. And it's could be interesting to see if blue ink or black ink or pencil or pen. I was involved in the genetic edition of Unamuno, a Spanish poet, with the University of Complutense de Madrid. And it was very interesting to show that for the users. And one of the solutions we got was to use XSLT to transform the XML before showing it on the final display. And it could be very useful to solve some different issues about format and compatibility, you know. And that was our case. It was very, very good because at the end we produce a static HTML project instead of dynamic project, and you have more space to try to work on the technical difficulties of the project. You can use React, or you can use Angular. Angular is what EVT uses, and it's very interesting because you have more freedom to try to adapt the results and keep it in the same source at the same time, you know. But thank you very much. It's been very, very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to see the project. Thank you.
We have a comment from Peter Robinson and also a hand. So Peter, if you want to elaborate on maybe you can unshare the screen. So
okay,
and we can also see.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. What?
Can I answer what I did before Peter?
Please, okay, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you. I would be interested in having a look at what you're working on. Just two notes. The first one is that if we use transcriptional elements from TI, of course, we can take advantage of the hand attribute, of hand notes in the manuscript description. And again, our use case is that of an author who is the only one correcting his work. Okay, but I can think, of course, of other use cases where you have other people correcting someone's work. So we could distinguish, I think we could distinguish easily enough these cases on the markup level, and then let the viewing software to highlight, for instance, a hand which is different from the original author. Second remark, consider that EVT is a static website. Okay, only instead of having static transformations, the TI document is transformed on the fly dynamically, but it doesn't need any server-side software. So it belongs to the minimal computing Marty Moll's endings project idea of static editions, which are not going to require much maintenance during the forthcoming years. I fully approve of that. Thank you.
You can move also the picture to that screen, then the audience here can see the online audience. And maybe open the chat. Perfect. Very good. Peter.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Peter.
It's cold and snowy in Canada. It's wonderful to be able to speak to Marina and Roberto and Franz and everybody I see here in the chat, who I, of course, got to see much more of when I was in Venice. And I am returning to Venice, but that's another story. This question of how you encode, I was really impressed by the idea of bringing together the transcription and the app tag together and importing the apparatus into the transcription and then creating the edition from that, which I think is a very, in fact, like the TEI originally did envisage this, and the documentation of the app element does say that it can be used in this way. But not many people have used it that way, so it's kind of nice to see it happening. And I have been putting into the chat the way we developed for dealing with this, which is described by Barbara Bordelejo in the documentation for the Dante Commedia. There's a long appendix there, which talks about how we do this. And as a background to this, the system we devised actually began from the other end. I think Roberto very nicely pointed out that the system, the TEI system, as described in the transcription of authorial materials, does concentrate on the documentary text. And to such a degree that it's possible to create very beautiful editions which mimic the appearance of the page very well indeed. But it's actually very difficult to see what the text is. You can see what it looks like in the manuscript, but it's very hard to extract the actual text. And as you say, it's actually for editors and for readers, it's very important to know what the text was at the various stages. And that was exactly our situation too when we were dealing with the Commedia and other medieval manuscripts, where particularly the situation, for example, in Luca Martini's annotations of an Aldine edition, where it's actually the corrections of the edition carry all the important philological information. So we needed to absolutely be able to preserve, to record these in-text variants. And then we needed to be able to collate them against other versions in the way that Marie-Luce has mentioned that she wants to do with Montaigne. And so we needed to be, it is actually critical to notice that a particular correction made by Martini is also the same text as in the Ashburnham or the Codex Trivalsiano manuscript of the Commedia. So there are solutions there. So we did devise a system that worked well for us. But as I've said there in the chat, there are limitations on this. And it works very well for short corrections. And generally that is true. If you're using the app system, it works well for short corrections. So I was very interested to see how you have introduced the mod element in there and to try, and you're able to cope with more extensive and more complicated corrections. So wonderful to see. Just one question, is it eventually the proposal to make the Trieste edition available freely on the internet so that this is what's happening?
It depends on Trieste, unfortunately. It depends on Trieste, on the library and the municipality of Trieste, because they funded our work, basically, not our work because we work for free, but they funded 4 bursaries, and so we what for them basically. So we are not completely free. But
Okay.
the prototype with the XML
Yes.
button is still is already visible.
Yes.
The prototype with the XML button.
Okay, so I can see that. So you would be able
You can
to
go back to the GitHub host page,
Yes.
working back the address from the github.io version, so you can see the markup if you want to.
Yes.
So you can make the XML and all the transcriptions can be available at the manuscript.
They are at the moment, because to publish using GitHub, you have to make a public repository. So it is not publicized, but at the moment, the current prototype is available. About the final version, of course, again, we will have to discuss rights owners, how say. But I'm confident that we will manage to convince them, because in the end, the most important thing is the manuscript, and the manuscript, I think, it is a boon to have it available for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you all, some of you this summer.
Please come back, Peter. You are missing.
Yes.
I'm coming.
Come back.
Hey, in May, actually, for some time.
Very good. Okay. More questions. There's a comment from Pedro that they have also problems with copyright questions and ownership. Yeah, please, Emanuela, please come here.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm very sorry to speak after Peter Robinson. I'm a little bit shy.
No.
Can I
Sit down. You can.
Yes.
have some rotation? No. Thank you for this inspiring speech, because for me it's very inspiring, because I decided to never work on this type of editions since I studied in Pavia, the University of Pavia, with a longer tradition in genetic criticism, and I followed Giulia Tancredi in her edition for the master at the University of Siena of a poem of Franco Fortini, Al di là della speranza, and I saw so many issues about about this that I thought that it was better to do this type of genetic criticism on books, on the old good books. Anyway, I think that the first big elephant in the room is in fact copyright, and our best experiments on 20th century digital scholarly editions in Italy, such as the Gadda Eros e Priapo of Paolo Italia, is on a wiki, and it's not possible to see the work inside because of these copyright issues. And at the same time, I remember the Christian D'Agata In Nome della Rosa edition with only incipit, and a lot of good example to how to work on this type of issues, but we are not allowed to use this text and also to use these critical editions for copyright reasons. So it's very difficult to work with this type of 20th century text. So it's difficult to have chance to resolve this issue. So thank you for this conference. So first is the copyright. Second, I remember that in Trieste, Cristina Fenu, that was another student in Siena, they developed with the University of Venice a project on network analysis and sentiment analysis on the letters of Svevo letters. So also this morning with students during the lesson, we were wondering how to mix methods such as the distant reading methods and all the part of analysis of corpora of text and the issues of a digital scholarly edition. So I was thinking during your seminar, how about to, for instance, in Saba, to prepare digital square editions of all the Canzoniere, how like you said before, and then to provide some tools to investigate all the Saba corpus, also make some networks with this analysis of the University of Venice and the Trieste Museum. Third point is the IIIF. I was thinking, I don't know if it's a good reflection, but how about use annotations, an annotation layer with IIIF, like in the case of Proust. I was thinking, is it possible to use IIIF to investigate a manuscript with the annotation layer? And I thought about this because I remember that AVT2 has also the IIIF inside the. And after another point, I'm sorry, but it's a special occasion for me. The dangers, the dangers for AVT, because AVT is an extremely easy and powerful tool to do things. But as you said, we cannot use before a model and then make the edition with the software, of course. But now AVT is on his third edition, third release. And I was wondering if in the future, maybe an AVT 10 or 12, will be possible to imagine a framework in which we can add a model and then have a release, all-in-time release of AVT. Because the danger is that we are adding little models of different issues into AVT, and make it in all the editions, all the versions, a little bit bigger. And I think that it could be a danger for the future to add these bricks. So I was wondering if it could be possible for the future to make in another workflow. So to add the first models and then I know it's a dream. And another things for AVT 20.
We just tasked us with integrating GPT into AVT10, so
yes.
Okay, AVT20.
For AVT 20.
For them, because
for the
we
future,
won't be there.
I hope that I think that we will have another problem in digital philology field, since we have also born digital drafts. So in the born digital manuscripts, we have many type of layers, and one of these is the text that is that we can catch only into the hexadecimal layer. So we have a 3D layer into a born digital file that is more difficult than a manuscript. So I think that in the future we should think also about new models to represent in a digital square editions also born digital files. And on this topic, Elena Spadini started to work in Bern into a project on digital square edition of born digital files and manuscripts. I finished.
No, don't go away because you have to remind me about the other question.
The first question.
Okay, I'll start with the last one. Okay.
So yeah, keep it short if possible, so we don't want to run too much over time.
Okay, sorry. Well, first of all,
no, all valid questions. No. thought about
I
this?
think the last desideratum is also the most easy to satisfy, because I don't think that it would be that difficult to have a parser reading into hexadecimal files and taking out the content and formatting it in a way that we would like. So this is just my initial impression, but I will have to ask to the EVT developers. About EVT and if I have understood your questions, the ability to understand what new encoding models could be made for. Okay, this really calls for some sort of artificial intelligence or machine learning by EVT, which clearly it is not yet ready, at least to do, but this is not something unconceivable in the future. Actually, I am going to explore during the next few months if it would be possible to apply to the GPT or a similar software API to make cross queries regarding a text, because this kind of software is very good at making summaries, understanding translations, understanding text in a way. So if we could take advantage of that, and we also have all the markup. For instance, if I wanted a statistics about how many variants are of the type diplography and are by scribe 2. Okay, this is a difficult task to do if you are not basing your software on a relational database, but it could be done, I think, by ChatGPT quite easily. Okay. Distant reading and close reading. Okay, the question was, can you mix them up? And the short answer is no.
But you can have both of them if you keep them
You
separate.
can have them having some sort of dialogue.
Yes.
So, because you could use distant reading to explore patterns. When you're seeing something of interest in a specific pattern, you could say, okay, EVT, show me that text at the point, and so you could navigate and have close reading after the distant reading. Okay, so this is a way I can imagine here on the spot, but I think possibly more intelligent ways could be devised to do the same thing. Okay, and I think I forgot
No.
the initial question.
It's copyright, and
Yes,
copyright
copyright.
is a problem indeed.
It is a
So
problem,
this is
okay.
my answer is that it is still problematic when we have a copyright.
But not for Montaigne, as Marie says in the chat, because
They haven't got
a copy
copyright.
digitized
Okay.
in the Mauritius Museum in Amsterdam. No? Mauritius, yeah.
I did it like Pedro Carrillo say, I did it for the Eurasian Latin archive.
So if you have very early modern authors, then you have better luck.
Avoid.
We have also private owners, many private owners that have copies. It's not so easy. Sometimes they don't want that we take pictures of the pages. And well, it depends. And some libraries also are very, very restrictive. We can take some pictures, but only half a page, not the whole page, not the whole text, of course. It still exists. It's getting better and better, but not everywhere. And especially because the copies of Montaigne's essays are very valuable on the marketplace. And so they are afraid that if it's online, the value of the copy will get down. Well, that's still a problem. And there are many, many copies in the castles in the UK, for example. They bought a lot of Montaigne in the 18th century. And so my colleague, John O'Brien, at Durham University, is going to every place where he could see, he could have this copy in hand, but not always to have the right to take pictures. Well,
We
We
feel
have-
because we have exactly the same problem,
problems with
exactly the
Jessica
same problem
Coperdoro, for
with the
example.
legacy, and so yes, common
Yeah.
problem.
So if there are no other existential questions, I looking forward to Verona, where I think we will continue the discussion, and I'm happy to announce that also our proposal from Daniele Fusi and the group working on a genetic edition of Goethe's Venetian epigrams, which I can assure is 13 times more complex because it's 13 witnesses with
Yes.
modification in the on the micro basis and then on
Yeah.
the macro level, and also the collection is changing all the time. But that's why Daniele is in the team to master this complexity. So that will be our presentation. Maybe that's a nice dialogue in Verona.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everyone from external for this engaging discussion, and thank you for your availability here and for so much clarity. I think it's really a field that has so many aspects that are of great concern, and yeah, I'm sure will continue on any level here.